Even though children normally and naturally want more influence, they also normally and naturally want to know that there are boundaries to that influence in order to feel safe and secure. The more consistent you can be between the homes, the safer they're going to feel and the healthier they're going to be as they grow up and develop. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship, and today we're talking about harmony and transition, crafting a positive co-parenting partnership in the divorce process. But honestly, y'all, this is a problem for parents whether they're living together or living apart. So even if you're not getting divorced, I encourage you to listen closely to this episode because it is super important. Man, it is a topic that really has my heart. You know, I grew up in a household where there was almost no co-parenting. What do I mean by that? I mean that my mom and my dad really didn't have a lot of agreement about what was important in child rearing. Sometimes one gave in to the other, but my brother and I always knew we could play one off against the other because they just weren't on the same page. Well, when people are getting divorced, this opportunity to play one off against the other becomes even more of an opportunity for children. We call it in our profession splitting, right? So anytime that a child can get one parent to turn on another, he is splitting them or she is splitting them and turning them against each other. Therefore, the child has more power. And it is normal and natural for children to seek more power. Why? Because we teach them to. I'm not going to go into the details about that, but it's enough to know that we're all always, probably the power is the wrong word. Really what we teach them to do is to expand their influence, right? And so it's normal and natural for children. I am going to explain it. Hey, think about it this way. A child is born and they barely have control over their body. So the first area that they're expanding their influence over is their body. But while they're doing that, they need to be fed. And they need their diapers changed, and they need their discomfort taken care of. And so they expand their influence over us by wailing, by laughing, by gesturing, anything that they can do to get our attention so that they can communicate to us that they're experiencing discomfort. Well, as they develop and grow, they expand this ability to influence those around them. Who is that? That's you and me, their parents, right? And so it is normal and natural for children to look for ways to gain more and more influence. It's built into them. It's part of their development system. It isn't just that we teach it to them, but we do teach it to them as well. All right. Now, here's the thing. Even though children normally and naturally want more influence, they also normally and naturally want to know that there are boundaries to that influence in order to feel safe and secure. In the same way that a child, up to a point, likes the boundary and safety of their crib, as they get older, they like the boundary and safety of their room. As they get older, they like the boundary and safety of their home. They also like the boundary and safety of knowing that their parents have them, that their parents are on the same page, that there is harmony between the parents. And so that's what I'm saying. This topic is super important, right? Now, I told you, my parents did not have a lot of harmony in terms of child rearing or many other things, if I'm really honest. And so my brother and I we were like little wildcats, but we felt pretty unsafe. I mean, we didn't know what to do. We were desperately looking for someone to tell us how to live, tell us where the line was, to tell us that it was safe. That's what makes this topic so important to parents, whether they're living together or living apart. Okay, now my friends who are getting divorced, let me speak particularly to you for a second. There is a term in parent coordination. Parent coordination is the art of helping parents to agree when they don't. Parent coordination is the art of helping parents to agree on what's best for the children and make a plan for what's best for the children. Parent coordinators operate especially in the field of divorce, though sometimes they can operate in other areas of life as well. There's a saying in parent coordinator that we are either working with parents who are parallel parenting or co-parenting. And we hold out this concept of co-parenting like it's an attainable idea. A speech I've been dying to make for a long time is the myth of co-parenting. The fact is that co-parenting is an ideal. It's something that any parents should aspire to, whether they're living apart or living together. And parallel parenting is a fallback strategy for parents who just can't communicate. Parallel parenting means that each parent runs their household or their lives completely separately with no input from the other parent. And even as I say this, I know that there are people in the audience right now, listening right now, whose parents have been living that way under the same roof. I know there is. But I'd love to hear from you if you're one of those people. I want to talk to you and explore this with you because I feel like this is something that we just don't talk about very much, is what is it like to grow up in a house with parallel parents? Very often they get divorced, as my parents did. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they stay together until the kids grow up, and then they have what's called gray divorce when the kids are adults. On some rare occasions, they stay together until one or both of them passes away. In all of those cases, it's really confusing for the children. All right, so there's a scale, basically. On the top of the scale, let's call it from 1 to 10. 1 is parallel parenting, 10 is co-parenting. Right now, I want you to take a look at yourself and ask yourself, where am I on that scale? Where am I and my partner on that scale? Let's say 5 is somewhere in the middle. Are you 5 and up, or are you 4 and under? If you're 5 and up, the chances are you have the possibility of becoming really good co-parents if you choose to learn to communicate and choose to learn to meet some of the challenges of parenting together, whether you're living apart or living together. If you're a 5 and under, your chances are not so good. You're probably better off just figuring out strategies for compensating for the errors of the other parent as you perceive them to be. All right, so now we've laid a foundation for this. You have an understanding of what co-parenting is. You have an understanding of what parallel parenting is. You understand the importance of cooperative parenting in terms of the child or children's sense of well-being. Actually, let me just drive this home a little further. The consequences for children who grow up in environments where parents don't agree is very often that they do a wider and wider search for some kind of rules. It's not unusual for them to break laws. It's not unusual for them to become alcohol or drug users or even abusers. It's not unusual for them to have early promiscuity. I mean, sexuality before it's emotionally appropriate for them is what I'm talking about here, and no moral judgment about that. It's possible for them to slip into depression. It's possible for them to get bad grades. It's possible for them to be social misfits. So the consequences of parents not being on the same page are actually pretty high. And so you really want to take a look at where are you on that scale. In fact, it wasn't really a plan for this episode, but I'm going to talk about a little later on what to do when you and your parent are not on the same page, and it seems irrevocable or impossible to resolve. But let's assume for a second that we're talking about the 5 to 10 people, the people who have a chance of becoming closer together, of having an even more shared view or vision for their children. The key is, of course, communication. It's respectful communication, all right? You don't have to like each other. You don't have to love each other. You don't have to have any kind of intimacy. You don't even need to care for one another, but you need to care for your children, and you need to respect each other's opinion enough that when there's a disagreement, you're willing to hear what they have to say and the why of it. All right? It's very normal today, in today's polarized society, for people to get stuck on the what, on the position, Oh, you believe that such and such president is great? He's terrible. That's an example of polarization. Oh, you believe that Tommy Smith is a good friend for our child? He's terrible. Another example of polarization. Polarization is when we make a judgment and we decide that the other person is wrong, period, without even hearing the why of it. Oh, you think so-and-so is a great president? Why? What is it about them that you think is great? When you're willing to go into the why and explore the basis for the opinion, the basis for the position, you might start to find things that you actually agree on. You know, without getting political, there are things that President Biden, who is now in office, is doing that were frowned upon by Democrats with the former president. And that's just the nature of the beast. It's not that all presidents are perfect or imperfect. It's that situationally approaches work or they don't work. And the approach is usually based on a value. So when you can get to the value under the approach, when you get to the value under the position, you can start to have empathy and understanding for what the other person wants, and you can start to find ways to resolve difference, right? The key to resolving difference is to get under the stated position and get to the underlying value. And when we get to underlying values, we find that we all pretty much want the same things. We just have slightly different ways of going at it. And if we're both willing to shift the way that we go at something, we can preserve our values and get there together, sometimes in an even better way than either one of us could on our own. So communication is key. Respectful communication, respecting the other person's opinion, respecting their position, even if you don't agree with it, okay? That's your position. Respecting it enough to understand what is it that they value that is driving that position. And when there is conflict, and when there is disagreement, all right, it's about knowing when the disagreement is becoming toxic and knowing when it's constructive. I can tell you straight up, right? This is when we know something's. I know when I'm toxic, when the underlying feeling I'm having is, I'm right and you're wrong. I'm going to win and you're going to lose. When the other person becomes the enemy, when they become alien, anathema in some way, I have crossed a line within myself to where, as far as my children are concerned, it's a no-win situation. Why is that, you may ask? I hear you asking, why is that a no-win situation? Because when I'm in that space, if I win and their mother loses, they lose, right? Anytime a parent loses, the children lose. Right? In order for children to have healthy and strong opinions of themselves, they need to see both of their parents as winners, basically. If they see their parents as losing, or they see their parents as losers, they start to internalize that representation of that parent, and it becomes part of who they are. And so it is super important that in our communication, when difference comes up, that we don't belittle the other person. When difference comes up, that we don't try and squish them. That when difference comes up, we don't try and make them wrong. That when difference comes up, we don't try and hurt them, abuse them. And if we're going to criticize them, that we do it in a way that's constructive and open. What would that look like? That would look like, if your value is X, then what makes you think that Y is the way to achieve it? That would be a form of criticism. When you do Y, don't you get a different result than your value X? Those are ways of critiquing and criticizing without saying, what? You want Y? What are you, a Democrat? What are you, a Republican? What are you, a communist? What are you, a fascist? Right? Judgment, when you go to a place of judgment, when we go to a place of judgment, the other person becomes something alien and a loser, and someone that we need to kill or hurt. I mean, unconsciously. I'm not saying consciously. It's not like we're sitting here thinking, I need to kill them. But the feeling that we have is, I'm going to get them. I'm going to show them. And when we do come into that space, the best thing we can do is what? Step away. right? If we find ourselves in that place, the best thing we can do is say, hi, hey, I'm really sorry. I am a little triggered right now. Could we resolve this conversation in an hour or in a day? When I'm feeling a little less antsy and a little more open, right? That we just back away. Maybe they're the one who's really yelling and screaming, and maybe we say to them, hey, you know what? I'm feeling just a little triggered right now. It's not you stop yelling and screaming at me, you get away from me, you fool. It's just, you just say that, right? That's honestly, when either one of you is in that space, it isn't going to work. And for many of you who are getting divorced, it is being exactly in that space that led to the divorce. And so it may be a challenge to learn how to do that. But if you want to parent together and be on the same page as parents, it's a skill set you're going to need to learn. When you're in that space, you can start to create consistency between homes. All right. And it's so important to your kids that they be consistent between the homes. Consistent bedtimes, consistent getting up, consistent homework times, consistent consequences when rules are broken, consistent rules, consistent routines, consistent story reading, consistent screen time. The more consistent you can be between the homes, the safer they're going to feel and the healthier they're going to be as they grow up and develop. And if you don't have consistency, if your co-parent or if the other parent, whatever you want to call them, has a disagreement about it, then explore with them what it is, because you never know. They might have a really good reason. Now, I said to you in the beginning, it's almost impossible to have perfect co-parenting. The truth is there are going to be inconsistencies between the two households, and sometimes you just got to accept that. You got to accept that you've got different parenting styles and you're going to do things a little differently. In fact, it's normal and natural for men and women in particular to have different parenting styles. Right? Men, their brains are wired so that they're very linear. Women tend to think more ecologically or environmentally or socially, if you'd like. And so the way that men lay out the rules and enforce them usually will be very different than the way that women do as a result. And we need to honor that about each other. We need to honor that the way that the other parent is with the children is what works for best for them with the children. Right? We can't be perfect clones. And we might even explore ways to lean into that. Traditionally, the role of the father is to speak faith and confidence into the children and to help them learn to take small risks and to help them identify risk and to help them feel safe as they explore risks. And traditionally, the role of the female parent is to help them have a better relationship with themselves and have a better relationship with others. It tends to be a more relational role. And so if that's the case for the two of you, you might want to lean into that. You might want to allow each of you to lead in the areas that your brain structure is strongest. If you're same sex, then one of you is going to be more goal-oriented and the other is going to be more relational. And so the same applies. You want to make sure that you're supporting your children's relationship with each parent. Know that each parent has a different role in regard to the children. Each parent has a different relationship. If and when you disagree with the other parent, the children do not need to know about it. It is always in our best interest to only speak well of the other parent. And I'm going to give you a true confession here. I've been remarried, second marriage for 24 years now. And it wasn't until the last couple of years that I caught myself making funny ha-ha jokes at the expense of my wife. And then I realized that I was actually undermining her with the children. And I just stopped doing it. Right? It's not helpful. It's not good for them. It's not helpful for her. There are all kinds of ways that we can catch ourselves undermining the other parent, whether we're married to them or divorced from them. And, it is kind of normal and natural for us to do that. In our own minds, we need to watch how those thoughts land when we're talking about the other parent or talking to the other parent in front of or with the children. You want to stay flexible. You want to stay open because guess what? As kids develop and grow, their needs change, right? And what worked with them a year ago probably won't work with them today. You want to remain flexible and grow because their circumstances are going to change. The circumstances of the school system are going to change. The circumstances of the community you live in are going to change. The circumstances of the world are going to change. And so you need to have flexibility. You may want to encourage them to get some support. There are professional resources that you might want to seek for yourself or for them. Therapists are great resources. Coaches are great resources. Parent coordinators. If you're having trouble agreeing with the other parent, you're having trouble having constructive communication, it just keeps going to that place where you want to make each other wrong. Parent coordinators are great, particularly if they're trained in mediation, can be great resources for this. And you know what? If you want to know more about that, feel free to reach out to me, rich@richinrelationship.com, RICHINRELATIONSHIP.com. It can get really bad if you're not careful. I have one couple that I'm working with where one member of the couple refuses to be in a live call with the other parent. The only way that they'll negotiate is via email. And they send emails back and forth with myself as the third party weighing in periodically. And it's very difficult to make progress on the co-parenting front when you're only exchanging emails. Why? Because emails don't have tone. There's no context for them. And so if you want to avoid having that kind of parenting relationship, I'm going to encourage you to get past your own triggers and get past the triggers of the other parent. And do your best to have some kind of dialogue that works. Now, I promised you that I would talk about what to do when you have a parent on the other side who is intractable. And if I'm completely transparent, this couple I'm describing right now, one of the parents is very triggered and very committed to painting the other parent as abusive. And the other parent is abusive, but not with the frequency that parent is accused of being abusive. And very often, the parent that's accusing the other one of being abusive is abusive in the way they make the accusation. It's really, really tricky. All right. If you want to avoid having that experience, then when you have someone on the other side who is very toxic, the best thing you can do is practice compassion. I work with a lot of people who are divorcing a toxic spouse, and they're not going to have a co-parenting relationship with them. They're going to have a parallel parenting with them for the most part. And so what we work on together is understanding why they are the way they are. What was it about their childhood that led them to be that way? We start to understand that a lot of their hostility and a lot of their reaction actually has nothing to do with the parent that I'm working with. It has to do with their own history and their own childhood. And there's just things that they're projecting onto the parent that I'm working with. And as the parent I'm working with starts to really understand what makes the other person tick, they can find ways to work with them, find ways for that person to feel like they're winning and have it be a win for the children and for themselves as well. And sometimes the other parent needs to believe that the parent I'm working with is losing for them to feel like they're winning. Sometimes it needs to look that way to them. And that's fine as long as the kids are in the forefront of the result. Now, is that relationship a good model for children? No, it's not. In that situation, the children get to try on the emotional, behavioral garments of each parent, and they will, as they become adults, decide which garment is most freeing for them. Remember, the children are always looking for more influence. And so the problem with being toxic is your influence is very limited. You may get a lot of power by being toxic, but in the end, your influence, the kind of influence you can have on people, is going to be very limited. You may rise to a position of power and have influence over many people, and the kind of influence you're going to have is going to be limited to that toxicity. And so children will naturally be drawn to whatever style of life, behavioral, emotional garments are going to give them the greatest influence over the most amount of people. And in the end, people who are compassionate and understanding of others will inevitably have greater influence. And so if you find yourself in the parallel parenting end of the quadrant with the other parent, then you probably need to find a good coach who's going to help you understand them. And I'm happy to give you a free call to talk about how to do that and help you find the right person, whoever that might be. Let me know what you think of this episode. If you like us, follow us, share this episode with other people. Please comment, and please feel free to reach out to me directly. And keep listening to Rich in Relationship, because I'm loving having you here.